look lost. Come with me.
I don't know where I am.
It's okay. Follow me.
She did not ask for his money. She did not ask for his name. She did not ask where he came from, or what he did, or why a man in a $4,000 coat was standing in the rain, outside a shuttered building on the east side of Baltimore at 11:01 o'clock on a Tuesday night, with a dead phone and no idea where he was. She looked at him once. I looked away. Then I looked back. "Stay quiet," she said. "Follow me." He almost laughed. He almost said something about not taking directions from a teenager in a school uniform. He almost did the thing that men like him always do, which is calculate the risk and decide the risk is beneath them. But the rain was coming down harder, and the street was getting darker, and something in the steadiness of this girl's eyes made the usual calculation feel, for reasons he could not immediately explain, wrong. So he followed her. What happened in the next 4 hours would take Marcus Weil 6 months to fully understand, and when he finally did understand it, he did not speak about it for another 2 months after that, because the understanding required him to accept something about himself that he had spent 44 years working very hard not to accept. Let me take you back to how he ended up on that street. Marcus Weil was not a man who got lost. He was the kind of man who had systems for everything. 2 phones, one personal and one for business. A chief of staff whose entire function was to anticipate what Marcus needed before he needed it. A car and driver who knew Marcus's schedule so precisely that the car was typically already running when Marcus came out of whatever building he was leaving. He had not hailed a cab, used public transit, or stood on a sidewalk without knowing exactly where he was going since approximately 2009. So the evening that put him on that street on the east side of Baltimore began not with carelessness, but with a chain of small failures that compounded in the specific way that things compound when a man is used to every single part of his infrastructure working at once. His company, Weil Capital, had a regional office in Baltimore. He had flown down from New York for what was supposed to be a 2-hour meeting with the Maryland State Pension Fund, one of his largest institutional clients. The meeting ran 4 hours. His driver, waiting outside, got a parking enforcement notice at hour 3 and moved the car to a structure 6 blocks away and texted Marcus's business phone. Marcus's business phone was in his coat pocket. The coat was in the conference room closet because the room was warm. He did not see the text. When the meeting ended and he came outside, the car was not there. He pulled out his personal phone to call his driver. The phone was at 14%. He called the driver. The call dropped at 11%. He tried to call again. The phone went to 8%. He walked in the direction he thought the car might be, not knowing about the parking structure, and the phone died at 4%. He was on an unfamiliar block, trying to remember which direction he had come from, when the rain started. That was how a man with a net worth of $2.3 billion came to be standing in the rain on East Fayette Street in Baltimore at 11:01 o'clock on a Tuesday night with no idea where he was. He tried 2 storefronts for a phone. Both were closed. He tried a third that was open, a small corner laundry, and the man behind the counter looked at his coat and his watch and his general appearance and said he was sorry. The phone was for customers and he didn't have a phone charger. This was not hostility, just business, and Marcus understood it, but it did not help him. He was standing on the sidewalk outside the laundry in the rain, doing the mental inventory of a man who has just realized that his entire ability to function depends on infrastructure he did not build himself, when a voice from slightly behind him and to his left said, "Stay quiet. Follow me." He turned around. She was maybe 15, maybe 16. School uniform, dark navy pants, a white-collared shirt that had been rained on enough to be damp at the shoulders. She was carrying a backpack that was clearly heavy from the way she was holding her left shoulder. She had an umbrella that she had tilted to cover approximately her and also part of him, which told him the offer had been made before she spoke. She was looking at him with an expression he would spend a long time afterward trying to find the right word for. It was not pity, it was not suspicion, it was not the particular wariness that a young black girl on a dark street at night has every reason to aim at a stranger in an expensive coat. It was something closer to appraisal. The look of a person who has already decided what they are going to do and is simply verifying that the other person is capable of cooperating. There's a church 3 blocks east, she said. They run a late service on Tuesdays. They have a phone you can use. I don't need, he started. She had already started walking. He followed her. Her name was Destiny Okafor. She was 16 years old and a junior at Paul Laurence Dunbar High School. And she had been on this street at this hour because she tutored math on Tuesday evenings at a community center 4 blocks from her house, and the session had run late because one of her students, a 10-year-old named Darius, who was falling behind in long division, had finally understood something tonight, and she had not wanted to stop the session in the middle of an understanding. She had been doing this every Tuesday for 8 months. She earned no money for it. The community center provided the space and the materials. She provided the time and the patience, which she had an unusual amount of at 16. Let me tell you what Destiny Okafor's world actually looked like. She lived in the house she had grown up in, on a street 4 blocks east of the community center, with her mother, Adayeze Okafor, who worked 12-hour shifts at Johns Hopkins Hospital as a patient care technician and studied for her registered nursing exam on a laptop at the kitchen table at 10 o'clock at night after Destiny was asleep. The house was a row house, like every house on the street, narrow, attached, the rooms stacked vertically, the backyard the size of a parking space. It was clean, and it was warm, and it was full of the specific organized discipline of a household, run by a woman who did not have a single hour to waste, and had arranged everything accordingly. Adayeze had raised Destiny alone since Destiny was 4 years old. She did not discuss this much. It was simply the shape of their life. There was no bitterness in it, no performance of sacrifice. It was a fact, and Adayeze's approach to facts was to understand them clearly and then move through them with as much efficiency and care as possible. Destiny had absorbed this approach so completely that it was no longer something she was doing consciously. It was simply how she moved through the world. The neighborhood around them was the neighborhood it had been for 30 years. Working class, mostly black, underfunded at the school level, and at the infrastructure level, and at the level of every city service that gets quietly deprioritized when a neighborhood does not have political weight. The school Destiny attended, Paul Laurence Dunbar, was a good school by the standards of what was available, which meant it had dedicated teachers working in classrooms with 32 students and textbooks that were 4 years old, and a mathematics department that was doing what it could with what it had. What it had was not enough. Destiny had understood this since 6th grade, when she finished a class unit on fractions in approximately 1 week, and spent the remaining 3 weeks of the unit watching her classmates struggle with a concept she could not understand why they were struggling with, until she asked one of them to explain what they were doing, and realized they were doing the steps without understanding what the steps meant. She had explained it to the girl sitting beside her in the way her mother had explained it to her, by drawing it first. The girl understood it in 20 minutes. Destiny had gone home that evening and said to her mother, "Why doesn't the teacher do it that way?" Adayeze had looked at her over the laptop. "Because she has 32 students," she said, "and some of them will get it the first way, and she has to keep moving." She paused. "That's why people like us need to fill the gaps." Destiny had thought about that for 2 years before she did anything with it. Then, when she was 14, she started tutoring a neighbor's son at the kitchen table on Saturday mornings. Then 2 more children the following fall. By the time Miss Eunice found her, through a church network, through the specific way word moves in neighborhoods where people know each other's business, in the way you know things when your survival depends on community, Destiny was already running what was functionally a small tutoring operation, with no name and no infrastructure. Miss Eunice had given it a room. She did not tell Marcus any of this while they walked. She walked and he walked beside her, the umbrella doing partial duty, the rain doing the rest, and she said nothing, because there was nothing that needed saying, and she had been raised by a woman who did not fill silence with noise, just because silence was there. The church was called Greater Emmanuel Baptist. It was a low, wide building, with a lighted cross above the door, and the sound of singing coming from inside, something slow and certain that Marcus heard when they were still half a block away. The double doors were open. Light came out of them in a warm, flat rectangle on the wet sidewalk. The girl pushed one door open, held it for him, and said to a man standing just inside, who appeared to be some variety of usher, "He needs to use the phone, Brother Joseph. His phone is dead." Brother Joseph, who was approximately 70 years old and wearing a suit that had been pressed many times and a tie with a small crosspin on it, looked at Marcus without any of the expressions Marcus was accustomed to seeing from strangers in situations where his wealth was visible. He looked at him the way a man looks at a person who needs a phone. "Come on back," Brother Joseph said. "Office is open." Marcus used the office phone to call his driver. The driver was in the parking structure, alarmed, having called Marcus's business phone 8 times in the last 90 minutes. He would be outside in 6 minutes. Marcus thanked Brother Joseph. He walked back through the church, past the service which was still going, a full room of people in pews, voices rising on something he didn't know the words to, a feeling in the room that he recognized from somewhere far back and couldn't name. He came back out through the double doors. The girl was sitting on the top step outside, rain now lighter, backpack beside her, looking at her phone. She looked up when he came out. "Your car coming?" she said. 6 minutes, he said. She nodded. She looked back at her phone. He stood there for a moment. He should have said thank you and left it at that. That was the appropriate transaction. He had needed help. She had provided it. He expressed gratitude and departed. Clean, complete, done. Instead, he said, "You didn't have to do that." She glanced up at him. "I know," she said. "You're out here at 11 at night," he said. "You have places to be." "I live 6 blocks from here," she said. This wasn't out of my way. He sat down on the step beside her, not because there was any particular reason to, but because sitting down seemed more honest than standing over her while having a conversation. She gave him a brief look that was not quite surprise, more like the acknowledgement that this was an unusual choice. "What were you doing out here this late?" he said. She looked at him for a moment, calculating whether or not he was the kind of person who actually wanted to know. "I tutor at the community center on Tuesdays," she said. "One of my kids had a breakthrough tonight." "Kids," he said. "How old are you?" 16. "You tutor children at 16. I'm good at math," she said. "The way you say something that is simply true and doesn't require elaboration. And they needed somebody." He thought about that. "What's your name?" he said. "Destiny Okafor." "Marcus Weil." She looked at him more carefully now, the way you look at a name you're trying to place. She placed it. He watched it land. "The investment firm," she said. "Yes." She nodded slowly, not impressed in the way people were usually impressed. More like she was filing a piece of information and deciding what it meant. "What are you doing in Baltimore?" she said. "State pension fund meeting," he said. "It ran long, and I got separated from my driver." She looked at his coat. She looked at his watch. She looked at the street in front of them, wet and empty, the sound of the service behind them, the distant sound of a car somewhere. "That's a really expensive watch to be standing in the rain with," she said. He looked at his watch. "It is," he said. "Doesn't it tell you where you are?" He looked at her. She looked back at him, completely straight-faced. He almost laughed again, and this time he actually did. His car arrived in 4 minutes, not 6. The driver, whose name was Calvin, and who had been with Marcus for 9 years and had been genuinely frightened by the last 2 hours, pulled up to the curb and came out of the car while it was still running, which he never did. "Mr. Weil, I am so sorry. The parking enforcement came, and I moved, and then It's fine, Calvin," Marcus said. "I'm fine." He looked at Destiny, who had stood up from the step and pulled her backpack onto her shoulder, and was looking at the car in the specific way a person looks at something that belongs to a category of wealth so removed from their daily life that it is almost abstract. "I'll have Calvin drive you home," Marcus said. "I live 6 blocks away," she said. "I walk it every week. It's 11 at night and it's raining." She looked at him. He looked at her. The same expression from earlier. The appraisal, the quiet calculation. "Okay," she said. She got in. During the 6-block drive, Marcus asked her about her tutoring. She answered in the direct, matter-of-fact way she had said everything so far. 8 students, ages 8 through 12. She did 2 sessions on Tuesdays and 1 on Thursdays. Most of them were falling behind in mathematics at school. Not because they couldn't understand it, she said, but because the class size was too large and the teacher didn't wouldn't have time to stop for the ones who needed a different way of seeing it. What does a different way look like? Marcus said. Depends on the kid, she said. Darius, the one who had the breakthrough tonight, he was trying to understand long division by memorizing the steps in order. That's how it was being taught. But he's a spatial thinker. He needed to see what division means before he could do what division does. So I drew it for him. Took about 3 sessions. Tonight it landed. 3 sessions, Marcus said. He'll have it forever now, she said. The steps are easier when you know what they're for. Calvin pulled up to the address she'd given. A row house on a narrow street. A light on in the front window. She opened the car door. Thank you for the ride, she said. And she said it the way people say things when they mean them, rather than when they are performing gratitude. Wait, Marcus said. She stopped. He did not know exactly why he said what he said next. He had made thousands of decisions, financial and operational and personal, and he generally knew with precision what the reasoning was behind each one. This reasoning was less clear to him in real time. He understood it better 6 months later. I want to see the community center, he said. Is that something you'd allow? She looked at him steadily. Why? Because you told me about it, he said, and I'd like to understand what it is. She was quiet for a moment. Thursday, she said. 4:30. It's on Ensor Street. You'll know it when you see it. She got out. She walked up the 3 steps to the front door. The door opened before she reached it. A woman, her mother, who had clearly been watching from the front window. Marcus saw the woman look past Destiny at the car in the street, and then look back at her daughter with a question in her face. And he saw Destiny say something quiet, and the woman's expression settle. The door closed. Calvin pulled away from the curb. Mr. Weil, Calvin said. Where to? Marcus looked out the window at the wet street. The hotel, he said. He paused. Calvin, how long have you driven in Baltimore? 12 years, sir. Before I started with you. The East Side. This neighborhood. What's it like? Calvin was quiet for a moment in the way he was quiet when he was deciding how much to say. It's had it hard, he said. Long time now. The schools are underfunded. The community centers run on almost nothing. A lot of the kids don't have a lot of options. He paused. But people are still there. Still doing the work. Marcus looked out the window the rest of the way to the hotel. He was at the community center on Ensor Street at 4:15 on Thursday. He had not brought anyone with him. No assistant, no Calvin, no person to create the buffer that men of his position usually bring between themselves and the world. He wore a gray jacket that was expensive, but not ostentatiously so, and shoes that were good, but not the kind that made people look at your feet. The building was a converted row house. The front window had a hand-painted sign, Ensor Street Learning Center. The paint was clean, but the building itself was aging. A front step that needed repointing. A rain gutter on the left side that had separated from the fascia and would need to be reattached before winter got serious. The door was unlocked and opened into a narrow hallway that opened into a wider room. 2 long tables pushed together in the center, chairs around them, a whiteboard on the far wall that was covered in a mathematics problem that had been partially erased and rewritten several times. 4 children were already seated. A woman who appeared to be in her 50s was cutting paper at a back table. Marcus would later learn she was called Miss Eunice, and that she had been running the center for 9 years on a combination of small grants, church donations, and her own retirement account. She looked up at Marcus when he came in, looked at him the way she looked at everything, which was steadily and without performance. You must be Destiny's man from Tuesday, she said. Marcus, he said, I don't want to interrupt. She said, 4:30. You're not interrupting, Miss Eunice said. Sit anywhere. Just stay out of her way once she starts. He sat in a chair near the window and watched. Destiny arrived at 4:28. She came in the back door, set down her backpack, acknowledged Marcus with a nod that said both hello and I see you are doing as instructed, and went straight to the whiteboard. 3 more children arrived in the next 4 minutes. Total, 8 children, ages ranging from what Marcus estimated to be 8 to 12. She ran the session for 90 minutes. Marcus had seen a great deal of things in his professional life that he respected. Complex negotiations, extraordinary presentations, financial minds working through problems in real time. What he watched for the next 90 minutes went on a different shelf from all of those things, not because it was more sophisticated, but because it was more alive. She knew every child's name and every child's specific sticking point. She moved through the room the way a person moves through a space they understand completely. She asked questions rather than giving answers, and the questions were always calibrated to the precise edge of what each child could currently see. She was never impatient. She was never falsely encouraging. When a child got something right, she did not cheer. She simply moved to the next thing, which told the child more clearly than any praise that getting it right was the expected outcome, not the exceptional one. Darius was there. He was 8 years old, with round glasses and a habit of tapping his pencil on the table when he was thinking. He was working through a problem with long division that he had not been able to see 3 sessions ago. Tonight, he worked through it in 4 minutes without help. He looked at it when he was done. Then he looked at Destiny. She looked back at him and tilted her head very slightly, which was, Marcus had already understood, her version of a smile in these contexts. When the session ended and the children filtered out, Miss Eunice put cookies on the table in a way that suggested this was ritual. Darius took 2, wrapped one in a napkin with the focused care of a child preserving something important, and left. Marcus sat at the table across from Destiny, who was marking something in a notebook she used to track where each student was. Miss Eunice had gone to the back room. That was remarkable, Marcus said. It's just tutoring, she said, not looking up. It's not, he said. What I just watched you do, the way you move between how each of them learns, that's not something most trained teachers can do. Where did you learn it? She looked up from the notebook. My mom taught me long division by drawing it when I was 7, she said. The same way I did for Darius. She said the steps only stick when you know what they mean. I just do what she did. Does your mom work in education? She works at the hospital, Destiny said. 12-hour shifts. She studies for her RN at night. He looked at her for a moment. How much does this center run on? He said. Miss Eunice's operation. Annually. She put down her pencil. She looked at him the way she had looked at him on the church steps, the appraisal, the calibration. Why? I'd like to understand the scope, he said. I'm not going to pitch you anything, she said. If that's what you're thinking. I'm not thinking that, he said. I'm asking because I watched something happen in this room tonight, and I want to understand. The infrastructure around it. She was quiet. Then, about $40,000 a year, she said. Mostly grants. Some church money. Miss Eunice puts in her own money when the grants run short. She paused. The roof needs work. It's been patched twice. The patching won't last another winter. That's probably $15,000 they don't have. What would $100,000 do? He said. She looked at him. To this center? To this center? She was quiet for a long moment. He watched her think. Not perform thinking, actually think. The same way she had been thinking throughout the session. Working something through before speaking. The roof, she said. Real repair, not patch. And the front step. Weatherproofing on the windows. It gets cold in here by November, and kids can't concentrate when they're cold. Another whiteboard. Proper math manipulatives, the physical ones. They help the younger kids understand place value. And Miss Eunice could pay herself something. She hasn't taken a salary since 2022. She said this last part matter-of-factly, without drama, the way she said everything. That's not $100,000, Marcus said. No, she said. What would the rest do? She looked at him for a long time. There are 2 other centers like this one, within a half mile, she said slowly. Both of them are running on less than this one. Between the 3, they serve about 60 kids. That's 60 kids who aren't getting what they need at school, and whose parents are working too. Many hours to fill the gap at home. She paused. 100,000 spread across all 3 would change what those centers can do for 2 or 3 years. Not permanently, he said. No, she said. Not permanently. Permanent requires a different conversation, but 3 years buys time. Time to apply for bigger grants. Time to demonstrate outcomes. Time to build the case for the kind of sustained funding that doesn't run out when one grant cycle ends. She stopped. I'm sorry, You said you didn't want a pitch. That wasn't a pitch, he said. A pitch is when someone tells you what you want to hear. What you just said was what's actually true. She looked at him. He looked at the whiteboard, the half-erased mathematics problem, the chairs around the table that had held 8 children who needed someone to stop and find the way they specifically could see. What do you want? He said. What do you mean? You're 16. You're clearly not going to tutor forever. What are you planning? She picked up her pencil again. Mathematics at Howard, she said. Then a PhD. Then I want to study why children who are perfectly capable of understanding mathematics systematically fail to understand the way it's taught. And I want to build a different model. He nodded slowly. That's a long road, he said. I know, she said. And she said it the way she said everything. Not as a complaint, not as a boast, just as information. She knew exactly what road she was on, and she had no illusions about its length, and neither the length nor the difficulty appeared to concern her in the way it concerned most 16-year-olds who talked about 10-year plans. He stood up from the table. He put on his coat. He picked up the card he had placed on the table at the beginning of the conversation. A business card, plain white, his name and a direct number, the kind he gave to people he intended to speak to again. I'll be in touch with Miss Eunice next week, he said. Destiny looked at the card on the table. She did not pick it up. She'll want to talk to you herself first, she said. She doesn't take money from people she hasn't looked in the eye. I know, he said. I'll come back. He went to the door. He stopped. Destiny, he said. She looked up. The thing you did for Darius, he said. The way you found the door he could walk through. That's not a PhD. That's already done. That's already working. She looked at him for a moment. That's why I need the PhD, she said. He came back the following Tuesday. He brought Calvin and also his director of philanthropic investment, a woman named Dr. Priya Shetty, who had an educational policy background and who Marcus trusted more than almost anyone. He did not bring anyone else. He sat with Miss Eunice for 2 hours at the table in the learning center, and Miss Eunice looked at Ennis Molunik and Verlautem the way she had looked at him the first time, steadily and without performance, and asked him questions he was not accustomed to being asked. She asked what he wanted the money to do. He said he wanted it to do what it was already doing, but without stopping when the grant ran out. She asked what he wanted in return. He said he wanted to see the math outcomes over 3 years. She said she would provide that. She asked if he was going to want to name things. He said no. She looked at him. Most donors want to name things, she said. I don't, he said. She nodded once, like a person noting that a fact has been verified. She asked one more question. She leaned forward slightly, her hands flat on the table, and she looked at him the way she had looked at him the first time. What brought you here? She said. Not the program, not the pitch. What actually brought you to this table? He thought about being honest or being diplomatic. He chose honest. A 16-year-old girl walked me through the rain to a church door on a Tuesday night, and I could not shake the feeling afterward that she was doing something more important than anything I had done all day, he said. And I had been in a room with pension fund managers for 4 hours. Miss Eunice looked at him for a long moment. That sounds about right, she said. Dr. Shetty worked with Miss Eunice on the structure over the following 3 weeks. The result was a 3-year operating grant covering all 3 centers on and around Ensor Street, with a structured reporting framework and an option to renew based on outcomes. Total commitment, $310,000. For Marcus, this was approximately what he spent on a quarterly board dinner. He did not say that to anyone. It would not have been useful. But he thought about it. The roof was repaired in October, proper repair, not patch, by a contractor from the neighborhood that Miss Eunice had been using for building work for 11 years. The windows were weatherproofed in November. The learning center was warm when December came, for the first time in 3 years. Marcus stopped by on a Thursday in December. Not scheduled, just nearby. He sat in the back of the room while the afternoon session ran. There were 9 children that day. Kezia, who was 15, and had been one of Destiny's students for 2 years, was helping run the younger group while Destiny handled the older ones. The room smelled like chalk, and the particular warmth of a room full of children concentrating. A space heater in the corner, that had been fighting a losing battle against the cold November subdrafts, now had nothing to fight. The room was simply warm. Darius was there in December, working through fractions. He had started drawing them first, the way Destiny had taught him, and then converting the drawings to numbers. He was 3 months ahead of his grade level. His mother, who worked 2 jobs and came to pick him up on Thursdays, had been told this by Miss Eunice in the specific, direct way Miss Eunice delivered information, and had stood in the doorway of the learning center for a moment without saying anything, then nodded once and said, "Thank you," in a voice that had a lot of miles in it. Marcus had been there when this happened. He had been sitting near the window, out of the way, and he had watched Darius's mother stand in the doorway with that nod and that thank you, and he had felt something he did not have a word for yet, but that Dr. Shetty, when he described it to her later, called accountability. The feeling of being in the chain of something, rather than above it. In the spring, Marcus flew to Washington for a conference. It was not the kind of conference he usually attended. It was an education policy event, not a finance one. He had been invited as a philanthropic supporter of community mathematics education. He sat in the back of the room for the first session. The second session had a panel of practitioners. One of the panelists was a 17-year-old student from Baltimore, who was presenting preliminary findings from a survey she had designed and administered to 60 students at 3 community learning centers, measuring the correlation between specific, instructional approaches and mathematical comprehension outcomes. Destiny Okafor had put together, in her junior year of high school, the beginning of the evidence base for the model she had described to him in the Learning Center in October. The panel moderator asked her what had changed in the last 6 months at the centers she worked with. "We got stable," she said. "For the first time since I've been involved, we don't have to spend any energy worrying about whether the lights will still be on next month." That sounds like a small thing. She paused. It's not a small thing. When you're not spending energy on survival, you can spend it on learning, both the kids and the people teaching them. That's what the data shows. The room was quiet. The moderator asked if she wanted to say anything else. "The 60 kids in our data set are not exceptional cases," she said. "They are not unusually gifted or unusually motivated. They are ordinary children who needed someone to stop and find the way they could see. That's available everywhere. It just needs the infrastructure to be stable enough to do the work." She gathered her papers. The room began to applaud. Marcus, in the back row, did not applaud immediately. He sat with what he had heard for a moment, the way you sit with something that has rearranged a room you thought you knew. Then he put his hands together slowly. He thought about a Tuesday night in the rain, a girl he had not asked for help from, walking 3 blocks in the rain to a church door because there was a person standing in the rain who needed a phone, and she was already going that way. Anyway, stay quiet. Follow me. He had thought, on that night, that he was the person being helped. He understood now, 6 months later, sitting in the back row of a conference room in Washington, that the help was not a single-direction transaction, that it had moved in more directions than he had tracked, and continued moving in more directions still, carrying with it everything that had happened in that room on Ensor Street over the winter. The repaired roof, the warm room, the fractions drawn before they were numbered, the 60 children who were not exceptional, who were ordinary, who had needed someone to stop. He looked at the program in his hands. He looked at her name printed under the panel listing. He had followed a 16-year-old girl through the rain to a church door on a Tuesday night, and, come out of it, a different man. He did not find that embarrassing. He found it accurate. She started at Howard in the fall. The week before she left, Marcus was in Baltimore for a meeting and stopped by the Learning Center on Ensor Street. He had started doing this, stopping by, not as a funder checking in, just as a person who found the room good to be in. Miss Eunice had a habit of putting a cup of tea in front of him when he sat down, that he had stopped, declining after the second time. Destiny was there, packing a box of materials she was leaving for whoever took over her Tuesday sessions, a girl named Kezia, 15, who had been one of her students for 2 years and who now helped run the younger group. Marcus sat with his tea and watched Destiny explain to Kezia which approaches worked for which students, the specific ways each child needed to see before they could do, all of it written in the notebook she had been keeping since she started. She was handing the notebook to Kezia. Kezia was listening with the focused, absorbing attention of someone who understands they are being handed something that matters. When Destiny was done, she came and sat across from Marcus with her own cup of tea. "Ready?" he said. "I've been ready," she said. "Nervous?" She considered this. "No," she said. "I know what I'm going there to do." He nodded. He looked at the whiteboard, which had a new problem on it in Kezia's handwriting, waiting for the afternoon session. You know, he said, I have spent 20 years giving money to things. Foundations, organizations, endowments. I have written checks and shaken hands and attended dinners and had my name read out at galas. He paused. None of it felt like what this felt like. She looked at him. What did this feel like? He thought about it honestly. Like I was in the room where the work actually was, he said. Instead of the room where we talk about the room where the work actually is. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, that's because the room where the work is doesn't usually have people like you in it. I know, he said. That's a problem, she said. Not a personal criticism, a structural problem. I know that too, he said. She looked at him. He looked at her. The same appraisal from the church steps, 11 months ago. The same calibration. You should come back, she said. To Baltimore. To rooms like this one. Not to give something, just to be in them. I plan to, he said. Kezia called from across the room. A question about the notebook. Something about Darius's current level. Destiny stood up. She answered the question. She walked back to the box she was packing. Marcus finished his tea. Miss Eunice came in from the back room and sat down across from him in the chair Destiny had been in, and put her hands flat on the table and looked at him the same way she always looked at him. She's going to do something, Miss Eunice said. Not with pride, not with performance. As a statement of fact, the way she stated all facts. I know, Marcus said. Something big, Miss Eunice said. The kind of thing that changes how the question is asked. He looked at the room, the two long tables, the chairs, the whiteboard with Kezia's problem on it, the window with the new weatherproofing that let the April light in without the April wind. I know, he said again. He meant it both ways. What Destiny would do, and what she had already done, to a room, to a center, to 60 children who needed someone to stop, and to a man who had been lost in the rain on a Tuesday night and had, without meaning to, been found. The door opened, and the first child arrived for the afternoon session, backpack banging against the doorframe, heading straight for the table with the urgency of a person who has somewhere to be and knows it. Marcus picked up his coat. He had a meeting in 40 minutes. He had a car waiting outside. He had a phone with a full charge, a driver who knew exactly where he was, and every piece of his infrastructure working the way it was built to work. He looked at the child settling into the chair, pulling out a notebook, already looking at the problem on the whiteboard. He set his coat back down. Miss Eunice, he said, do you mind if I stay for the session? She looked at him. She looked at the child at the table. Calvin can wait, Marcus said. Miss Eunice picked up her tea. Sit down then, she said. He sat down. Kezia walked to the whiteboard and picked up the marker. The afternoon session began. Outside, on Ensor Street, April moved through the afternoon in the particular way April moves through Baltimore, slow and cool and full of light, that hasn't decided yet how warm it is going to be. The new gutter above the door caught the last of the morning rain and directed it cleanly to the downspout, the way it was supposed to, the way it had not been able to do for 3 years before the roof was fixed. A girl named Destiny Okafor was somewhere across town, packing the last of her things for Howard. 60 children were in classrooms and living rooms and on sidewalks, carrying in their heads the beginning of a way of seeing that had been put there by someone who stopped, and a man with a net worth of $3 billion was sitting at a long table in a converted row house on Ensor Street, watching a 15-year-old named Kezia draw a picture of a fraction on a whiteboard for a child who needed to see it before he could do it, and understanding for the first time in 44 years that the most valuable thing he had ever been inside was a room like this one. He had followed a girl through the rain to find a phone. What he had actually found was harder to name and longer to keep and worth more than anything on his balance sheet. Stay quiet, she had said. Follow me. He had, and he was still following, just in a different direction now. Have you ever had a moment when someone you did not expect, someone younger, someone with less, someone you almost walked past, showed you something about the world that you could not unsee? Those moments are the real ones, not the ones we plan, the ones that arrive sideways, in the rain, on a Tuesday night. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And subscribe, because there are more stories like this one, and I am not done telling them.